Welcome to Philanthropy in Action, where we engage philanthropists, activists, students, and the community in discussions on how we use our time, talent, and treasure to make the world a better place. I am Maxim Thorne, and I teach Philanthropy in Action at Yale. Today's guest is Oscar-winning producer Bruce Cohen. Bruce won an Academy Award for American Beauty and a nomination for Milk. Thank you so much for coming, Bruce.
Absolutely.
And thank
Excited
you
to be here.
to our students who are joining our conversation. I welcome them to the show. Bruce, you have such a passion for filmmaking, yet you combine that passion with your work for social justice. Tell us about that.
I grew up in Washington, D.C., and actually Falls Church, Virginia, a suburb outside. And one of our neighbors, a wonderful woman named Marianne Hurt, who I love very much, was a grand doyenne of Northern Virginia Democratic politics at the time. And yes, there are Democrats in Northern Virginia. And she got me involved in my first campaign when I was 4 years old, and I had the bug. I would go out with her door to door as a, admit, slightly precocious 4-year-old. It was a candidate running for supervisor. I have a very nice thank you note from Allen Magazine thanking me for my campaigning. And so I grew up as kind of a political junkie right from the time I was a kid. The Watergate hearings happened while I was in junior high school, and my mom let me stay home from school and watch them because she saw that it was something I was deeply interested in, and she had a hunch that I would learn at least as much from watching the trials as I would from my public junior high school in Northern Virginia's classes that week. Politics had always been a real love of mine, and sort of turned into a lot of it formulated from my time at Yale into a love for social activism as well.
Great, thank you. We have questions from our students, particularly related to your politics and your social justice activism. Dan.
Okay. So in an interview after your wedding, you stated that you hope that we translate all of our beliefs, political and personal, into all of the work that we do. I'm wondering, do you see that as a personal choice or a moral obligation? So do you think that's something that binds other filmmakers or producers, for instance?
Well, I think when I was speaking of it, I was daring to speak only for myself in that it was a personal choice. But I do believe it is a moral obligation, and so I would certainly encourage other people to believe that it is as well. When you forge a career in the entertainment industry, if you're lucky enough to be a part of a film or television show or Broadway theater or some type of art that gets a wide audience, it becomes unescapable to you that what you have created does have reach, and it does go out into the world, and it's going to affect the world one way or the other. So I do believe that you are to some extent responsible for what that effect is going to be. However, there is and there should be at many times a line between art and politics. So for me, the fact that I'm doing both helps me separate those things. That if I'm doing a fictional film, then I wouldn't ever dream of censoring something in that film if it wasn't politically, strictly adhering to my beliefs. Doing a film like Milk is a different matter, certainly. But so, your fictional work should express a variety of different viewpoints, but then your political work and social activism work, I believe in a perfect world should be very specific to you, deeply passionate to you, and something that you completely believe in.
Bruce, the class, we grapple with people who give their time, who give their talent and their treasure to changing the world as they see it. When you married Gabe, which was the first gay marriage in Los Angeles, and the mayor of Los Angeles married you, did you see that as also a political act that you were giving? It was a philanthropic moment where you thought of the ramifications related to that?
Yes, in our case it very much was. We had decided to get married about 9 months earlier, before it was clear at all that marriage was going to be legal in the state of California. And so actually we had a wedding planned for friends and family, a spiritual wedding, or religious even, if you will, because my rabbi was going to perform the ceremony, who we love, and we were doing it in Telluride, Colorado, which is a place that we go to a lot and love. And then suddenly the wedding was scheduled for July, and then in May, suddenly the Supreme Court ruling comes down and marriage is legal in the state of California, which was, extraordinarily exciting to us that, wait a minute, now we're actually going to get legally married, which then we quickly learned that you physically have to get married in the state. So actually our Colorado wedding was not going to have any legal significance, which is when we realized, we also have to get married in Los Angeles, which is weird because straight people don't have to do that, but it's constantly sort of evolving of where we are on the full equal human rights spectrum.
Great. Christina.
Hi, my question for you is, where do you think your biggest potential for being a philanthropist lies? Is it in the work you've done? Is it in your money, the money you can raise? Your claim, your fame, what do you think that is?
It's a very good question. While there's no need to get out any violins for me, certainly I'm not a wealthy individual as philanthropists go. So I, as of now, maybe that will change it someday, can't write the big checks in those circles. So part of my, at the outset, that inspires me to try and contribute in as many other ways as possible, and which is raising money, but also a lot of the things that I've found that I've been able to bring to my philanthropy is my producing skills, which is what I do for a living. Everything needs producing. And fundraisers need producing, political campaigns need producing, public relations awareness campaigns need producing, and in some sense, producing is really just a big fancy word for ideas and then putting them into action. And to me, that's a very exciting combination. That's sort of what that's what I run on, is that combination. There are some people who specialize in having ideas, and there are some people who specialize in putting ideas into action, and then there are creative producers whose job is to really do both. So that's a skill that I feel that I can bring to my philanthropy, where, in any cause I get involved in, am I going to write the $1 million check? No, but am I going to hear what the organization is, what the cause is, try and think of great ideas for events, for PR, try and figure out ways to put those ideas into action, and then try and help raise the money to bring that all to fruition? Yes.
Carl.
Hi, my name is Carl. My question for you kind of relates back to how you're raising money for your foundation, the American Foundation for Equal Rights, which is fighting Prop 8. Thank you again also for doing all your work. I'm from California myself, and really appreciate everything that you're doing.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
My question for you is, how do you go about raising that money? Is it more from a wide base of people with small donations, or is it more from maybe big donors who write the big checks?
Well, it's a combination of both of those things, which, in philanthropy and in money raising in general and political campaigns, you always hear both. You always need you want the grassroots. You need the people who are out there writing the $50 checks and the $100 checks in large numbers. And with a political campaign, or even with the American Foundation for Equal Rights, which is a court case, but public opinion does come into play in a court case. It is something at times that the judge or judges, depending on the court, will keep in mind, especially on social justice issues.
Bruce, is there a position of privilege, though, that allowed you and Rob Reiner and Chad Griffin to come together to make that happen? And what are the things that you weighed or didn't weigh that convinced you that this was the way to go? Because there was, as in many other areas, different perspectives on strategy. In the civil rights movement, you know, the strategy of Martin Luther King was radically different from the strategy of Malcolm X and different from what SNCC was doing. And in the LGBT movement, there are also different strategies and voices. Why did you choose that strategy, and what convinced you that that was the right one vis-a-vis any others that were on the table at that time?
Well, a prevailing current strategy for LGBT people to get our rights was the legislative strategy, which was elections. And a lot of that, actually going back 20 or 30 years, was actually forced upon us, which was the opponents putting referendums on ballots in states to take away our rights, and they were winning. There's been like over 50 initiatives on state ballots regarding LGBT rights in the country, and we've lost all but one of them. And that brought Rob Reiner and Chad Griffin and Dustin Lance Black and myself, as it had brought many others in different movements before them, to realize, as I was saying before, hold on, why are we waiting for, we're waiting for a majority of Americans to decide we have rights? It is not their right to decide what is constitutional and what isn't. The Constitution exists as a document, and we are entitled to that protection. And when you're not receiving the protection you believe you are given in the Constitution and the amendments that have been passed, you go to the courts and ask for those rights. And that's what had happened in Brown v. Board of Education, in Loving versus Virginia, in the different LGBT cases that had come up, Romer v. Colorado and Bowers v. Hardwick. And so we got excited about following in that tradition. And the initial question that we wanted to explore first for ourselves is, do we truly believe that when you hear the arguments that preventing same-sex, any two people from getting married when any other two people can get married, is that unconstitutional? According to the federal Constitution. And the more that we studied it, and as we brought on Ted Olson and David Boies, who come from the two opposite sides of the political spectrum, the more that we understood the passion with which they believed that they have a winnable argument, the more excited we got about becoming one of those cases. I mean, that was, you know, the dream from the beginning is, you know, and win or lose, as painful as it would be to lose, you know, these seminal cases, when they come along, they change the course of American history. And it was time for that case to come along on the gay marriage issue, because it's the gay marriage issue has become the sort of the leading edge of the LGBT civil rights movement. Did you study? What the Court of Appeals feels, and we'll see what the Supreme Court feels.
Did you study law, Bruce?
My father is a lawyer.
But did you?
I did not study law. No.
What is fascinating, right, is that no legal scholar could do a better job of explaining the legal intricacies that Bruce Cohen just did. And one of the things that fascinates us is the passion that you bring to an area that you care about, even though your expertise has been in filmmaking. But you hear that passion and that content that obviously took a lot of time in developing, that expertise that allows you to fulfill all these other areas of your life. But I want to turn to...
Well, let me just say, because this goes back to part of your question that we hadn't really gotten to yet, which was the connection between my career and whatever success I have achieved in the career and the philanthropic work. And what I have found is that there's a beautiful karmic flow back and forth, where everything that I'm doing and experiencing and learning from in the philanthropic world and in the political world really helps and informs my filmmaking and vice versa. And what you just described that's a fundamental part of producing a movie. Every movie you start, you are not an expert on whatever the subject is about. Most likely, even if you might have some passing interest, but you don't know the setting, you don't know the characters, you don't know the jobs they're doing, you don't know the situation they're doing. But your job as overseeing a crew is you are now going to become an expert on the world of whatever that movie is. When you're doing Hook, you need to learn everything there was about pirate ships and Peter Pan and fictional stuff. When you're doing Alive, which was the Uruguayan rugby team crashing in the Andes, we learned everything there was to know about survival in the wilderness for 62 days. With Harvey Milk, you become an expert on Harvey's life. You end up having more access and more information on Harvey and his friends than perhaps anyone who's come before you, just by the definition that you're the first people doing a narrative film about him where you're needing to learn all this information. So the needing to become an expert in a field that you previously were not an expert in, and then translating that to the public in a way that they will understand and be moved by and be entertained by, that's your job as a producer. So there's no more perfect job than that suited to the world of philanthropy and politics.
Ellen.
Yes, so in light of what you're speaking about, the importance of getting across your message and the sort of opposition that you've seen to the fight against Prop 8, I'm curious which you think is most valuable to your cause. Is it the role that you've had in AFER and the Harvey Milk Foundation, or would it be the more subtle role that you have as a filmmaker in sort of focusing and forming public opinion?
Well, one of the truly almost insanely fortuitous and exciting moments of my life was as the movie Milk started to come together, and I was going to get the chance to be one of the producers, because these were the two great loves of my life, movie making and activism, and specifically LGBT activism. And there was this moment where I was like, is this really going to happen, that I'm going to get to do something that brings them both together? That was beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of. I mean, I always sort of thought that I would have both loves. I didn't ever hope to believe that I'd have one project that would be both of them. And so, but the answer to your question is, I mean, I think in a perfect world, it's both. It's both. You don't ever want to be either or, but I am in this very blessed position having these two strains where you get to do both. There's a lot of people who only have a career in the film business or who only work in social justice and politics and social activism, and so they're more or less stuck in one or the other. They can try and subtly affect things by making great movies and TV shows, or they can actually be out there raising money and campaigning. I get great fulfillment and passion by doing both, specifically because I do think that they build on each other. I mean, the case now too, because of it's Rob Reiner and Chad Griffin and Dustin Lance Black and myself and others. We're bringing our Hollywood background and experience to how do we produce this case in the most effective way possible? How do we get the message out? Our goal is that we want everything that AFER does in association with this case to just be the classiest, most informative, most clearest message possible, and so we've really strived to do that.
But I want to explore a theme. So the question asked you in part about the other things that you bring to the table, and you talked about Dustin Lance Black. Dustin,
the play,
writing 8. Mm-hmm. So there is a value to bringing his talent to this. If you could hazard quantifying all of the non-financial components to this, the grand strategy of producing, as you said, this moment of change, what would that be?
It would be, to steal from the Visa commercial priceless. You can't put a price on that, and that's why you want that. You can raise money till you're blue in the face, but if you're not spending it in an exciting world-changing way if you're not bringing the big ideas to it, and if you're not pulling in the creative talent to really move people, then you're not going to win. I mean, your issue. That's sort of, I think in a lot of ways that's what it comes down to. It's a perennial problem with civil rights movements, and it's been a huge problem with the LGBT movement, preaching to the converted. And you end up, and milk is a good example. I mean, the gays and lesbians and liberals and city people saw that movie in droves, and it moved them, and they wept, and they came out just as supportive of the gay rights movement as they were when they went in. Did we change hearts and minds? Did we get to the homophobes? Did we get to the people who were disgusted by gay people, and maybe milk might have changed their mind? Well, that's hard to quantify. I mean, yes, anecdotally, absolutely we did in some cases, because we would get cards and letters from around the country, and I dragged my uncle, or I brought my relative, or so to some extent we did. More importantly, the core group who sees it and who's moved and inspired, I mean, actually Milk, the movie, sort of helped birth this whole next generation of LGBT activists, all these kids who rebelled against the established organizations and went out and started changing the world on their own. So yeah, the impact is huge, but it didn't, Milk ended up doing $40 million at the domestic box office. Brokeback Mountain, by comparison, did $110 million at the domestic box office. So weirdly, because actually, if you're squeamish about gay stuff, there's actually more to weird you out in Brokeback Mountain than there is in Milk. But way more straight people saw Brokeback Mountain. Way more conservative people saw Brokeback Mountain. Way more Republicans saw Brokeback Mountain. Way more homophobes saw Brokeback Mountain. Way more everyone saw Brokeback Mountain. Which is kind of weird too, because things just reduced, and at its core level, Brokeback Mountain had sex and was like a love story, and Milk was political, and the guy got shot, and that's just, you only have one movie you're seeing on Friday nights. So 8 is these unquantifiable things that you're talking about, where you're sort of bringing your talent and you're taking from what you do as your day job and trying to bring it to the movement. The hope always is twofold, that it's going to inspire the choir, but that it's going to reach out and change people's minds.
Jasmine.
Thank you so much. I find your argument very compelling, and I was just wondering, how do you see yourself or your actions contributing to the global LGBT movement worldwide? Because there's a lot of other communities struggling out there, and I was wondering if you think your own resources, your experiences, the legislative strategy, how do you see that help other people attain their goals?
The hope is that it absolutely will have a huge impact worldwide. There were a lot of incredibly beautiful and powerful stories about Milk and the impact that did have worldwide. It's actually a great follow-up to the preaching to the choir question, because it's in America, in West Hollywood or the Village or big cities, gays who feel like they have full rights, even though actually they don't, but feel comfortable and have successful lives, and they go to see Milk and they're inspired, and they go back to their condo and have white wine and go to sleep. When it showed in places in Europe and in Asia and in Latin America, where it made a profound difference in people's lives, to even know that there was someone like this, and to see that he had struggled, and to be able to gather and actually see a movie that had gay content was like a transformative experience.
Thanks, Bruce. Now we go to Connor.
Hi, my name is Connor, and thanks for talking to us today.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we have read and talked about in this class is actually the fact that conservatives are more likely to give to charity than people who identify as liberal, and particularly religious conservatives, who are probably the least likely to support your cause. So first, have you found that to be an obstacle in your efforts? And secondly, if you see the day when the LGBT community has equal rights, and I hope that you do, what then do you feel is your obligation to give charitably and participate in philanthropy?
I think that the conservative question, my first thought is it goes back, it relates to the preaching to the choir idea, because what the conservative movement, including the religious right, does incredibly well is they follow instructions. And it's what's one of the advantages that they've had over the years, but it also comes from the very sort of ideological difference between liberal and conservative, is that conservatives like order and structure. Give us a leader, give us our instructions, give us our marching order. We go to church on Sunday, you tell us this is bad, we believe you. You tell us to get out our checkbooks and write a check, we get out our checkbooks and write our check. The more we have one focused opinion moving forward and we're all together, the more we're going to accomplish stuff. It's good philosophy, very effective philosophy. Liberals, on the other side, you get 5 liberals in a room, there are 26 opinions. No one even wants to agree. Don't tell me what to do. I'm a liberal. I've fought my whole life for my own individual, unique idea. So the very concept of uniting behind something is kind of an anathema to liberals. Liberals would all rather stay at home and do what they want to do. That's what they're fighting for. In some ways, this is, of course, is a humorous exaggeration, but not much. It's by definition, liberals aren't as good at following instructions. They don't all show up at church on Sundays. They certainly don't all get out their checkbooks and write them when you want them to. Now, but where that is not really the case is with the individual groups who are the ones that don't have rights, who are fighting for their rights. When African Americans are fighting for the rights in the women's rights movement, and now in the gay and lesbian movement, these movements are very focused. These movements do write checks. The gay and lesbian community raises a huge amount of money for its own rights and has been very successful in that in general over the years. So those individual groups in many ways can compete with the conservative movement as far as getting behind something. But the problem is that it's all the rest of the liberals who aren't perhaps a member of the group. It's getting their attention. It's preaching. It's getting beyond your choir. Then your other question was about?
So I think one aspect of the divide between conservative giving and liberal giving is that liberals think of it as a government responsibility to redistribute wealth and guarantee social justice, whereas conservatives see it as an individual obligation to give back to the community. Thus, you represent a kind of interesting hybrid between personal work and advocating for the government to change things. So if the LGBT community, hopefully when, secures their federal rights that are the same as straight individuals, what do you think is your personal obligation in terms of philanthropy?
Well, I think I don't know that I'd argue with you necessarily on the broader philosophical truth of what you said, but on the ground with these civil rights movements, it ends up practically being very different, because the civil rights movement learned, and the women's rights movement following them, and the LGBT movement learned the government isn't giving you anything. Not only did these movements not wait for the government to redistribute wealth or take care of social services, the government is the enemy. The government is who we were fighting. We're fighting the laws and we're fighting the courts, I think for the sort of that general liberal group, which is who I was talking about before, who are the ones that we're all trying to reach and get on our side, maybe yes. But when you're within a civil rights movement fighting for your rights, you've got to be proactive, and the government is who you're fighting. The government is who you're demanding the rights from. The conservative movement becomes your adversaries because they're trying to prevent you from getting those rights. But at the end of the day, they're really not. They're not physically who you have to deal with. What you're trying to deal with is the government and changing laws. But
Bruce, would you respond to this part of Connor's question in this? You've had successes. This CNN poll proves that there's been yet another success in changing the hearts and minds of a majority. When you achieve the ultimate success, will your activism continue? And do you believe all of those folks who are now energized in the LGBT movement, will they continue to be active in some other area, or is it just this movement?
Well, okay, the struggle's never over. I mean, surely we're not going to make a case that the African American civil rights movement is over, or that women's rights is over. I mean, the ERA has never passed. Women technically don't have equal rights in this country to this day, and you look at all the statistics of salaries and, you know, Title IX and sports, and nothing's equal. Nothing's even close to being equal. So it would be a nice idea, but the struggle's never over. But we were talking earlier about, you know, the far international issues versus American issues, and the question of, like, how would you balance your time between them? When you're starting out as a philanthropist and wanting to have a lifelong association with social activism, which I hope to goodness all of you will, because obviously you're interested in the subject and now you want to put it into practice. At the beginning, you might, and you probably should, have that moment where you get to decide what causes you're involved in. And that should be a very personal and very passionate choice of where you're going to try and affect change. And in America, around the world, for a certain group of people, for candidates, what are your issues? The good news and the bad news is, if you're at all successful in that space, if you start doing good work, if you're able to either come up with great ideas or put them into action or raise some money or write some checks, the incoming needs and requests for your everything, for your talent, for your money, what's this class? For your
time, talent, and treasure.
Time, talent, and treasure is so enormous, because the world needs so much help, and people need so much help, and there's so much to be done, that you actually quickly, and it's a good thing because it means you're doing the right work, you will lose, the balance shifts. It's really not, it's not up to you anymore as to, oh, I'm going to go out and do this. It's much more incoming. You know, I certainly have, I have more requests for my help in all these different areas on any given week or month than I can possibly do. So it becomes just a choice of, you know, you've got, but that's kind of how you know you're in the struggle, and it's kind of how you know that it'll never end, and it's kind of how you know that there's so much work to do, is you look at all of the groups and all of the people and all of the events that need your help, and you got to prioritize. You know, you don't want to overextend yourself, because if you're not coming through for people, then you're not helping anyone. And so it's figuring out, you know, okay, I'll focus on this case today, and you know, the gay rights crisis that's happening in Africa that this other organization needs my help on, they're going to have to wait right now. Oh, but Human Rights Watch wants me to get involved in the Southern California Committee, and I could kind of kill two birds with one stone, because I've just learned that they're actually doing great work in Africa. So if I join that committee and help them with their dinner and bring a little Hollywood zhuzh to some of the stuff that they're doing, then I can actually feel less horrified about having to say no to the group that contacted me directly just because I have too much on my plate. So it's, you know, but I think it's all a positive thing, is it becomes, you know, it's like triage. It's more just a matter of 16 candidates in 12 different states all want me to have events for them and raise money for them and campaign for them, and the elections are all in November. And I only have one group of people that I go to that I ask for money. So I know I can't do 16. How many can I do? And who are those people? And let me try and jump in and help the ones I can. And I'm just not going to be able to do it all or do everything, obviously. I mean, there's just way too much to be done.
Well, Bruce, thank you for doing this, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, students, for being so clever and passionate with your questions. And thank you for joining Philanthropy in Action. As Bruce Cohen said today, the struggle isn't over, so what are you doing to change the world?